Welcome to Real Brave and Unstoppable. Here, you'll hear stories and inspiration about showing up in the world authentically and having the courage to create the life you want. I'm your host, Courtney Rivard. I'm a mom, recovering engineer, lover of the outdoors, and professional life coach. I help smart women just like you live happier lives full of purpose and joy by empowering them to love who they are, get unstuck, and take action toward creating the life they dream of. In other words, I help them be real, brave, and unstoppable. It is possible, and you can do it too. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Real, Brave, and Unstoppable. This is episode number 83. So just a few things before we dive into today's episode. I have lots of news. This week is spring break for my daughter. That's not really news that necessarily concerns you, but it's always interesting to try to manage spring break with work. Those of you working moms out there, I guess you can probably relate to that. But it is also nice to have some extra little time with my little miss who's 12, my little bestie. A couple of other things. The podcast now has its own website, dedicated website, so you can check it out at realbraveunstoppable.com. There is a spot for you to enter your email address, and you can get on the email list if you would like to receive updates. I will warn you, you're not going to get a lot of emails to start because I'm still kind of working on content that will best support the show. So you can be assured that if you put your email address in there, you're not going to get flooded with emails, I promise. But it will help you stay up to date with the latest things that are going on the podcast. So do that. Let's see, what else do I have? I recently started a Meetup group. So cool. I'm so excited. I just on a whim was like, I'm going to start a Meetup group for like divorced moms or divorced people, divorced women or women who have, recently gone through a breakup. And mostly, I just thought, well, what a great way to share what I do, but also I thought maybe I'll meet some cool people this way. Always up for meeting new people. So I started it, and like the next day it had like 8 people signed up for it. And now I'm up to like 16. So I'm super excited. If you live in the DC area, but the name of the group is called Rise Strong Divorce and Breakup Support for Women or something like that. But so you can search it up, or I'll put the link in the show notes too. If you're local, go join that. And we're going to probably have our first event the last weekend of April, which will likely be a hike. Yay. Last announcement is, I was also going to say about the podcast. Now that the podcast has its own website, I'm actually writing accompanying articles on my website, CourtneyRivard.com. So if you at any time prefer to read an article or read the article in addition, you can go over to the blog there and do that. Yeah. So final thing is I would love to announce a new program I have. It's called Rise. It's a 3-month one-on-one coaching program, and it is designed to support women who are going through or have gone through a divorce or breakup and are rebuilding their lives. So super excited about this program. I have been through it, and I'm super excited to help people get through it too, to provide the support for you. I like to think of myself as a Sherpa, that I will help you on your climb up the mountain. And I know you can do it, and you don't have to do it alone. So with that, let's dive into our episode. Today, I'm talking about resilience and perseverance with a little side of grit. My journey is far from over, but resilience, perseverance, and grit are all reasons why I'm where I am today. I've had so many times in my life where I have fallen flat on my face, and it's really overwhelming to get back up and keep going. But while it's never easy, I've always gotten back up and bounced back, refreshed. That might be a stretch, but kind of. And armed with new lessons and new insights, ready to forge ahead. And it sounds simple when I say it. It hasn't really always been quite that simple, but That's kind of the overall thing is you just got to get up. You just got to keep going. There's a quote, I forget who said it. I don't even know. I'm just paraphrasing at this point, but it doesn't matter. It's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's really what matters is how many times you get back up again. I totally believe that for sure. I mean, and it's true, right? So, yeah. I recently did an interview with Authority Magazine where I shared 5 things that you can do to be more resilient. And during that interview, I was asked to share a time where I had one of my like biggest setbacks and how I bounced back from that experience stronger than ever. And the story I told was about when I discovered my marriage was over. So, if you've listened to this show for a while, you probably know the story, but the short version is I had spent 17 years of my life creating a future with a man that I loved, and our marriage was far from perfect. But we had hopes and dreams, and all of that shattered, along with my discovery that he had been having an affair with another man. So, my husband and father to our 2 children, I discovered was gay. So, at first, when I discovered this, like I thought my life was over. I went into extreme depression. I couldn't see how I was ever going to survive in this, new life that I was being thrown into. I totally felt like a victim to my circumstances. I was totally overwhelmed with fear about so many things. And I honestly did not know how I was going to make it. I mean, I knew I would, I think deep down, but my brain was so overwhelmed with fear that I couldn't really see it at the time. But I did make it. And while my life is far from perfect, no one's life is perfect, as we know, I've bounced back to carry on with my life and take it in the direction of new hopes and dreams that I have for myself. So I'm really creating a new life that's bigger and better and different than the one before. So the life I'm building is really true to who I am. And no one can ever take it away from me because I built it based on who I am and I'm solidly grounded in it. And I create it. No one can take it away. So let's talk a little bit about resilience and perseverance and grit. This is going to be mostly like the focus of this is resilience, but they're all tied together so beautifully. I like to start with definitions a lot of the time. So, resilience is from Merriam Webster. Resilience is defined as an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. Now, I would question the easily part. I wouldn't say that I recovered easily from my misfortune, but nonetheless, I did recover. So, I think it still counts. As I thought about that word though, resilience, I felt like there's more to it. How does one just like have something hard happen and then just bounce back? Like there's more to it, right? Sure, I recovered, but I didn't just recover in one easy linear process. So what else factored in? Perseverance and grit, I think. Perseverance, the definition of that is continued effort to do or achieve something despite difficulties, failure, or opposition. And grit is the firmness of mind or spirit, unyielding courage in the face of hardship or danger. Now we're talking. Those all just package up really well together. Resilience is possible because of perseverance and grit. And looking at those definitions, I can see that I have both of those qualities and I always have, which has allowed me to build resilience. You're able to be resilient because you persevere. You can't just snap your fingers and say, well, I'd like to be resilient today in the face of adversity. I mean, technically, you can do that. But the chances of the average human being just being 100% resilient all the time without practice, not very good. So, taking this one step further, you're able to persevere when you have grit. And grit, if you've ever read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, it's a very good book. But she talks about how she discovered that talent alone is not a guarantee of success. She describes grit as a combination of perseverance and passion for a singularly important goal. And she goes on to say that is the hallmark of high achievers in all things. And I took that from her book. And she goes on to say that what goes through your head when you fall down is so much more important than talent or luck. Bingo. Love it. It's exactly. One thing I notice when I look back at the 5 things I shared with Authority Magazine to build resilience was a common thread through most of the things was related to the stories we tell ourselves or what goes through our head. Not just our thoughts, but the narrative running on autopilot in our head. For example, an example of a story is, let's say I lose a bunch of money in an investment, but I have this story running in my head that says, I shouldn't have invested that money because I've always made stupid decisions with money and I really should never try that again. I'm likely to just cut my losses and continue telling myself that story, right? And that's going to further prevent me from future opportunities that might come my way. So I'm just going to give up because that story tells me, don't touch that hot stove again. So, plus, that narrative is probably going to also affect your confidence in the future with things related to money or investing money. On the flip side, what if you had a different story that was like, oops, that didn't work out. So let me look at what I could have done differently so I don't make that same mistake again next time. You haven't made that incident mean anything about you or your intelligence or your worth, so you just move on. You just bounce back, right? Bounce back from your misfortune. You're resilient. So when you have a desire to persevere, like to look at your lessons and keep trying, that helps you bounce back. And grit, which is the underlying courage in the face of hardship or fear, that makes it possible to persevere. And those 2 things, I think, are what really build resilience or what factor into resilience. I could use my own story as another example. I've always been a person who's had the courage to persevere, even when things are really hard. I'm just really driven that way. But even though my stories get in my way sometimes too, after my divorce, there were days where I did just want to lay down and give up. It seemed really hard and way too risky to try to rebuild myself and my life. Mostly, I was just so overwhelmed with it. It was scary, it was uncertain, and my stories at the time told me that I was incapable and really unworthy. But even though I was in that really terrible place and felt kind of hopeless, I still had this underlying grittiness. There was something that was deep inside me that really told me that I still had the courage, to keep going, even if it was scary, right? That grit piece of things was already there. I already had that. But if I hadn't had it or the desire to persevere, I wouldn't have been able to find that resilience piece of me. I wouldn't have been able to be resilient, to bounce back and to rebuild. I likely would have stayed in that victim energy space and lived my life with chronic depression and anxiety. So I'm glad that I figured that out. But I didn't feel resilient at the time or particularly gritty, really. But those qualities were really tucked away. They were just waiting for me to find them again. Grit helped me get started, and the drive to persevere helped me like rebuild that resilience muscle or to like find it. And you've been when you've built up your muscles a lot, you've been working out and then you take a break and you kind of have forgotten that you have strength or your body is forgotten, but then you start working out again and it comes back pretty quickly. That's kind of what I'm talking about here is that you kind of, your stories kind of tell you things that aren't helpful about how you can't succeed or you're incapable, you're not worthy. But then, when you look and find that little bit of grit or the drive to persevere, it leads you back to that resilience pattern that is, and the more you practice it, the stronger that gets. That's why I always talk about look inside for what you need. What you need is not outside of you. You can find that grit. You're not going to find it outside of you. It's inside your heart. You're going to find it if you sit and look there. So I want to talk about the 5 things that I did share with Authority Magazine about what I believe help build resilience, because, like I said, it is a muscle. You have that underlying grit, grittiness, or the drive to persevere. Even if it's little, like you can build those things too. You just need to find that little spark. And then you have what it takes to really start to build that resilience muscle. And the things that I talked about in the interview I did with Authority were, first of all, really check your perspective. Circumstances are inherently neutral. They don't have any meaning until we give them a meaning. If you go, I've used this example before, and I don't know why it always comes up for me, but if you go to get ice cream and all they have is chocolate ice cream. They're out of, they're out of everything else except chocolate ice cream. They're out of chocolate ice cream is the circumstance. One person might not care at all because they love chocolate ice cream and that's what they would have picked anyway. But another person hates chocolate ice cream and they're going to be pissed that the only kind of ice cream is chocolate. So same circumstance, 2 different meanings, right? Circumstances don't have meaning until you give them a meaning. And the meaning is typically derived from our stories or that narrative that's playing in our heads about ourselves and the way the world works. So take a good look at the story you tell yourself about your circumstances. Adversity might seem really insurmountable, but it doesn't have to be. And most people don't realize this, but you are totally 100% in control of the stories you tell yourself about your life situation. Your stories or your thoughts, they create your feelings. And then your feelings affect your outcome. So if you can work on thinking differently about your situation, it will help you power through those tough times. It'll help you kind of reframe them so you are able to to put one foot in front of the other a little more easily. The second thing is to accept your circumstances and let go of your need to control. This is really hard for a lot of us, including myself. But out of all the things I'm going to talk with you about today, this one probably is the biggest one. I probably should have put it first. You can't control anything that's happening outside of you. So it's really more productive to focus on what you can control, which is how you interpret things and how you respond to things outside of yourself. One of my favorite authors, Pema Chodron, she's a Buddhist nun and, like I said, an author, very prolific writer, has tons of books. They're all amazing. But she says that the reason that we suffer is because we cling to the way we want things to be or the way we think things should be. We get so attached to that and we can't really see any other way that would be okay for us. And when I went through my divorce, for example, I had this incredibly hard time wrapping my head around the fact that I no longer had a normal, quote unquote, normal family. The story in my head was that a normal family included 2 married parents who lived in the same home with their children. So when I was finally able to let go of this and embrace a new story, that there's really not any such thing as normal, it's different, my pain was a lot easier to manage. When I was in that time of my life, I'm also a photographer and I did at the time specialize in children and family. I couldn't photograph families because it highlighted that I did not have that normal family anymore. And so when I finally could let go of that they're just a different kind of family. And that's not to say it wasn't hard or it still is hard, but it just is. So like accepting that and letting go of that's the way it has to be for it to be good. That's what I had to do in order to feel better about myself and about my life and to actually move forward. So, how does this play into resilience? Well, when you can accept what's happening, even if you don't like it, see, that's the other thing is doesn't mean you like it. It is what it is, right? You can navigate the bumps in life more gracefully. You can kind of roll with the punches a little bit more. When you're accepting or letting go, you tend to be more in the present, and that makes it easier to just kind of take the next step that you need to take forward. The next thing is to work on your relationship with yourself. The relationship you have with yourself really is the most important relationship that you will ever have. It's the basis for all the relationships you have with other people. So, how do you feel about yourself? Do you love who you are? Most of us have an easier time seeing our flaws and our shortcomings, things that are wrong. We beat ourselves up a lot more easily than we celebrate ourselves. But when you're in the middle of a really hard time, that's really not super helpful. It's really important to celebrate your strengths, look at your accomplishments, look at what's going well. The negatives really do come up so much more easily. It's just human nature. But make sure you give the positive things, the good things, some attention too, equal attention. When you can get in touch with who you are, when you can accept your flaws, because we all have flaws, and when you can celebrate your strengths too, you will be able to find the courage and the strength to show up in the world in a way that's true to who you are. And when you can draw on those innate superpowers you have, that will help you stay on track and focused on getting through the hard times. I've found personally that this work has helped me just find a good foundation, and it's helped me really ground into who I am and where I am in my life. And it's actually helped me with the previous thing, which is acceptance and letting go. So the fourth thing is connection. Connection is king. Seek out connection with other people. You don't have to do this alone. That's a lot of us feel like we have to have it all together all the time, or we might have stories that people don't have time to help us and things like that. But you don't have to do this alone. It's so much easier to build resilience when you surround yourself with other people who will lift you up when you're feeling down. And don't be afraid to reach out for support. I alluded to it before, but there have been several times in my life, many, many, many times in my life, where I didn't ask for help, didn't ask for support, because I either had a story that said everyone else is too busy, or, I had to look like I had my shit together all the time. Recovering perfectionist here, but that's a pretty lonely place to be when you're struggling with something. There was a certain point where I felt so broken that I just didn't have the energy to put on any armor. So I realized though that when that was the case, when I showed up simply being myself without worrying about what I looked like, without worrying about any of those things, I started to build these deeper, more meaningful connections. And I found that when you have the courage to be yourself, other people feel more comfortable being themselves too. They feel more comfortable letting their guard down. And it really is contagious. So having these connections to other people is really going to help you draw on your innate strengths, like your grittiness and your drive to persevere when the going gets tough. That helps you be resilient. And the last thing is to take good care of yourself. I know you've heard the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. It's also true that an empty cup will not give you any reserves that you need to persevere in hard times. So when you're feeling overwhelmed or run down, exhausted, burned out, it's a lot harder to keep a positive outlook on what's not going right in your life. It's hard to do all of the things that I talked about already today, except check your perspective, connect with people, work on your relationship with yourself. It's hard to do those things if you're not adequately rested, fueled, you know. During the hardest times of my life, not taking care of myself would lead to depression. And I really had to make sure that I got enough sleep, ate healthy, and moved my body in ways that felt good. Other things that are important is to manage your stress, manage your to-do list, set boundaries. Don't be afraid to say no sometimes, and make sure you take a lot of time out for yourself, for your soul. Like if you journal or meditate or hike, be in nature. Like, make sure you have that time. It's so important. These things really should be non-negotiables in your life because the cost of not having this self-care in place is just way too high. You're going to be able to navigate hard times so much easier when you have this rest and this nourishment in place. So, at the end of the day, we're all capable of being resilient. And some of us come by it easier than others, but it really is like a muscle that you can strengthen. And the 5 things I talked about today can help you build that muscle. And when you combine it with your desire to persevere and that gritty courage to keep putting one foot in front of the other, you're totally going to be unstoppable. So, great topic. I love talking about resilience, and I hope that these things were helpful for you. I hope that you can, really take note of them and maybe put some of them into practice or work on some of these things in your own life. And don't forget to try to get out of your head sometimes and get into your body and just sort of feel into where do I feel that grit in me? We all have a little bit of it. So just kind of sit with it. Where do I feel that gritty courage in me? What does it feel like? And where can I practice using that this week? So that's my challenge to you this week is where can you practice gritty courage? Gritty courage. All right, before I go, one more thing. I just want to remind you to check out my new program, Rise, the 3-month private coaching program geared towards women who are rebuilding their lives after a divorce or breakup. If that is not you, if you are just going through a really rough time in your life, this program will help you too. But in this program, I'm going to help you get your bearings. A lot of times when we're in this place, we feel a little lost. Like, where am I going from here? I don't even know who I am outside the relationship. Like a lot of those things. And so I'm going to help you get your bearings. It's kind of like when you're in a shopping mall and you're trying to find where you are, and there's the "you are here" thing on the map. And you're like, okay, I can't even figure out like where that actually is for me. Or like if you're, out in the wilderness and you have a map, but you don't really know what part of the map you're actually standing on. That's one of the first things in this program is just to kind of get your bearings, get honest about where you're at, what's not going well, what is going okay, and what do you want to change. And then in the program, there's a lot of things that we work on, and everybody's different. So things that we work on are managing your emotions, learning how to feel them without freaking out or numbing out with alcohol or food, learning how to manage your mind. It is true that time heals. However, you can't just sit there and wait for time to heal. You need to work on your mind and the stories in your head that are keeping you from healing. So that's a big part of it. And we also work on reconnecting with yourself, having some accountability over getting back to some of the activities that you loved to do before your relationship, reflecting on the person you are without the relationship, and then also just really loving that person, like all the parts, all the parts. The goal of the program is really to get you, like I said, get your bearings and get to the place where you feel like you can kind of create a roadmap for moving forward and really rebuilding, creating the life that you want, that's bigger and better than what you had before, creating a life that is yours. No one can take it away from you because you created it based on the truth of who you are. So it's a really great program. I'm excited about it. We're going to be doing a retreat later this year, exact date and location TBD. Lots of good stuff happening here. So excited. All right, friends, if you haven't already, if that program interests you, or if you're interested in what else I've got going on over here, go to my website, CourtneyRivard.com/let's-talk. And if you're interested in Rise, to check out more details about that, it's CourtneyRivard.com/rise. All right, friends, I will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Real, Brave, and Unstoppable. If you'd like to learn more about creating an authentic life that's true to who you are, Visit CourtneyRivard.com/lovelife to download your free guide on how to build your vision and create a life that you love. You'll be so glad you did. I'll see you next time.